Yohan Eskrick-Parkinson, welcome to Dive Beyond Sport. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me today.
I'm looking forward to this. For those who don't know you and who don't know the journey that you've been on, can you give us an elevator style life story to sum up what's brought you to this point now?
Yeah, for sure. So I was born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I started diving around the age of 7 years old, quickly turned competitive and dove in Canada, nationals and whatnot up until the end of high school, at which point I decided to take my career to the States to study university at Northwestern University in Chicago, or just outside of Chicago. And I studied neuroscience there and then dove at the same time competing in the NCAA throughout the States, which was an amazing experience. And I think prepared me a lot for the real world. That's I'm still not quite in yet because I'm still in sport at this point. But yeah, and through university, my trajectory in my career kept going up. But nearing the end, I realized I still had potential, and I wanted to keep going and see how far I could go. And that was at the point where I had a coach recommend that, if I have my Jamaican citizenship as well, I should really try to pursue diving with them. And that was when it all started, with a DM to Yona here. To see, hey, I was kind of joking at first, like, hey, what do you think about Synchro? ?
I love that. I love that.
Have that DM somewhere in our chat, but
Yeah.
it started there, and did 2 years diving, representing Jamaica, traveling the world. I was based in Edinburgh at that point with Yona, and we did something real special as far as teamwork and kind of making some history throughout the world, which was awesome. So I'm grateful for that experience. And right at the end, I had gone to Qatar with Yona to qualify for the Olympics with that goal in mind. And we came so close. We finished, I believe it was 13th, and ended up walking away with that. And, I saw it for sure that either way, however that year went, I was going to stop my career at that point. And whether I made the games or not, I mean. And yeah, so I moved back to Calgary with, bittersweet feelings, because we've been on such an amazing journey and I learned so much. And I quickly kind of turned around and started bobsled. Didn't anticipate that to happen, but it's been a ride. I've been doing that now. I'm in my second year, and I'm on the road to try to qualify for the Olympics a second time in a different sport at a different Olympics.
I feel like it's, and I've never done this before, but I feel like I need to add my elevator story to tie into that, because there's obviously extremely close connection here. And my experience with Yohan obviously started with that rogue DM of Synchro ? With a video of a dive. And I think the video was a double out. And I remember watching it, I was like, that's actually quite a good dive, to be fair, but like, is this a joke, or is this like how serious do I respond? Where do I go with it? I can't even remember what I responded, to be fair. I probably should have found the response.
But he keep his legs together on his double out.
Better than me.
No.
Better than me. It was weird. He would lose his legs on the full out, but keep it together on a double out, which makes no sense.
Interesting.
But I got this message, and straight away in my head, the idea of potential synchro sport. And for me at that point, it was post Tokyo, it was 2021, and that was a really cool time to have such a message, because it felt like I was ready to take on that extra responsibility and have an extra event. I'd had so many years of being jealous of watching people being able to do synchro events and not being to participate in that myself, and just being in the individual events, struggling sometimes individually and not having that person to lead on, traveling alone all the time. And I was just thinking, imagine if I had someone with me, imagine if I had someone going to these competitions. And I had no idea that it would work out in the way that it did, but almost humoring the joke, I posed the question, do you want to come to Edinburgh and compete in this competition and see what we can do? And Yohan literally came to Edinburgh for a week in 2021. We did Scottish Nationals, and the synchro just worked straight away. It was remarkable, really, how well it worked, and that got me so excited. That was one of the things that helped reestablish my purpose and my enjoyment of diving, because not only was I now doing it for myself, I was doing it to help support someone else, but also doing it to develop the nation of this tracksuit that I'm wearing. And it was amazing. And I think that kind of leads into my first question, which is obviously like we made history together representing Jamaica. For you, representing Jamaica, choosing to get your citizenship, discovering your heritage, how did that contribute to your identity, or how did that change your identity at the time compared to the Yohan at college in the US studying neuroscience? How did that whole process change the way that you saw yourself as a person?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was really like connecting with a part of myself that I hadn't really been connected with before, in a way, right? Like for me, I had, reached out to my dad to get my citizenship, and we talked about it then, and a bit about the process. And for me, it was a chance to then, of course, at first it was an experience in myself of just, yeah, like I said, connecting with that side of my life that I knew was there. I've always had it, but having grown up in Canada and basically never gone to Jamaica at that point, and it was just a chance to really, yeah, explore that side. And of course, doing that was also, in my mind, that chance to give back, like you mentioned. That tracksuit, every time you wear it, you aren't just performing for yourself. You're performing for the people of that country and all their supporters across the world. And I thought there was something absolutely amazing about the way that Yona did that, because that's why I looked up to him before I even met him, was, seeing this guy who had overcome a bunch of barriers to represent a small country that, he has a strong connection to. And I thought that was a really honorable thing to do. And I thought, if I have this chance to join him and in a way bring diving to Jamaica even further, I thought there's not much more to put meaning into sport than that, because especially in an individual sport, you're often thinking, it's about yourself, and that gave a bigger purpose as well for me.
So also then, just rewinding even more on the sense of identity, and I think identity with you, Yohan, is something that I'm really interested to explore way more. But obviously the first step, I guess, from my side is, you started diving at 7 years old. I was the same age when I started diving. Obviously it's very young. And I don't know about your experience, but for me, once we started diving, it was very much super intense. And I very quickly became Freddie the diver. Like, that was who I was. That was my identity. That's what people called me. And I think the diving pathway typically is very intense like that. And I just wondered, was that the same experience for you? And how did you immediately become Yohan the diver as well?
Yeah, I'd say that identity kind of changed throughout the years. Early on, it was, I was doing multiple sports, and, I was really enjoying school when I was, and I'm like 14 and starting high school, all those years, I really enjoyed that. So I feel like I had a mixed identity. And then, of course, as I got kind of later in high school towards graduation, it started to become Yohan the diver, because, it was so much of what I was invested in, and it clearly opened up the paths it opened up new paths that I wouldn't have had without it, like going to university in the States. That simply really wouldn't have been possible without being an athlete, and in particular a diver. So I think that up until that point, I just thought of myself as a diver, and I really wanted to pursue university for the fact that I knew that diving wasn't going to be my whole life, and that was kind of a step for me to, while still being a diver, pursue something different that would hopefully last past my diving career. And that was kind of the first step for that. And then when I graduated, of course, then I was back to being the diver again, because I didn't have a job. I was planning on going to med school, still am, but at the time I put that aside in order to pursue sport at the highest level. And that was when it really hit me. Like that was the first time where I really realized, I turned 22, I moved out of Chicago back to Calgary, and in, a few months I knew I was moving to Scotland to dive with Yona. And that was the first time it hit me that I that's really all I have at the time. Yeah.
Literally the
Crazy year.
yeah. Like you put so many years into this one thing. It's like actually that is the thing, and it's quite a cool realization when you kind of get there and you realize that is the thing. Because I think it creates clarity. It can be one of two things. I think it's either scary that you have one thing and there's potentially not much else, but it could be this one thing where you do have clarity over your real purpose and what you really want to do. But also fundamentally around it, you can gain so many valuable experiences and lessons that can help kind of put you ahead of other people in life in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, we shared a lot of time in airports and hotels together and had some great conversations. So it's actually hard to come up with novel things to ask. But one thing I don't think we've ever really discussed before, and speaking about being a Yohan the diver from a young age in Calgary and then moving to the US, is the concept of being a minority in the sport. And I really don't think we've ever discussed that. We stood out in the diving world. I stood out in the diving world in the UK. I presume it was exactly the same for you as you were growing up in Canada and then in the US. How did that kind of affect, if at all, your diving being that standout individual because of skin color and not looking like other people in the sport?
Yeah, I feel like I didn't really maybe process it or experience much of that, sense of difference in identity until I was in university. I could have told you when I was in high school or earlier that, there weren't a lot of people like that looked like me on the pool deck, but it didn't carry much weight because at the end of the day, you're just a bunch of kids working towards something really big. And and that changed a bit when I went to university, of course, because not only did we have swimming and diving there, but we had, 8 or 10 or more other sports at the school that had men's teams that were far more diverse than swimming and diving, which was, a majority white, of course. And that like had me curious about kind of what it means to be a diver that looks the way I am and is unlike, a lot of the swimmers and divers that were on the team. But I feel like it just gave me the chance to kind of connect with more people outside of just my own sport as well, and see how they kind of carried themselves in environments where they were the minority. And that was a big experience for me.
I mean, also it's the way like Yona phrased that question as well, because I also realized in thinking about this recording that I've also never actually had the conversation with Yona about like that feeling, that same question. Actually, I've never had that with Yona, and I realized that I always saw Yona as just like one of the boys. You talk about being a young kid, just going towards a goal. It was like that was the way I viewed Yona, and I don't know if that's innocence or whatever, but I just totally felt like we were all just, in the same group doing the same thing. But I never really considered what it would be like from Yona's side, from your side, Yohan, and what it would, and then to make that decision to represent Jamaica. I mean, Yohan, was that difficult? I mean, first to you, but also I guess I open this up to you as well, Yona. But was it difficult? Obviously, it's an amazing opportunity, but being Canadian-born, lived in Canada, and Yona's the same for you, being UK-born, lived in the UK, and then taking that step through your heritage to represent Jamaica. Obviously, it's exciting, but was that difficult also?
I I think that kind of starts with how I felt in university, because like the reason I started thinking about that topic more was because of all the history around it in the United States, you know. It's like previous, and especially in the South, in the times of segregation, there were, you know, people that looked like me and Yona weren't allowed to swim in pools, or certain pools, or most pools. And that's part of the culture that prevented a lot of people looking like us going into those sports, and that has carried down generations. So that was kind of the first like touch I'd felt with it. But at Northwestern, being, you know, modern day, it was a chance for me to stand against that legacy. So I was quite proud, not the fact of just being the looking the way that I do, but for the chance to be that a person that can show that, you know, this can be a part of whoever's culture it is. And the reason I say whoever's is because I'm also a mixed race person. Of course, I come from, my mom is of British ancestry and German ancestry, and my dad is Jamaican, so of African ancestry. And with that, like, I'm an Afro-Caribbean like person who is also, you know, has ties to Britain and born in Canada. Like, there's so many things. So when I'm in the States, it can be, oh, you're a black person. Or if I'm in Jamaica, they could say, oh, well, you're Canadian because you have the accent, you know? So I you're always walking the lines with these identities. And that's, I guess, why my perspectives of those things and the role that I have fulfilled to do something positive changes depending where I am. So with Jamaica, it was this chance to show that people who are Jamaican, or who were born in another country but have ties to Jamaica and have their citizenship, can you know, essentially make waves in the sport without making waves. Right?
Oh, that's the goal, right? Minimum waves. But that's like a really well articulated answer, and describes so many perspectives of what we're talking about. Because from my perspective, it actually took some time to really embrace that particular identity, because as Freddie said, I did actually just feel like one of the boys. I never felt like I was treated different. And it's a question that I've had quite a lot in terms of my progression in diving. Did I ever feel like that was hampered because of my race? Did I ever feel that there were subconscious biases put towards me because of what I looked like, or being the minority in a particular group? And I honestly never did. I truly never did. But I don't know what's going on in people's heads. You know, that subconscious bias could be the difference between a judge giving me a 6 and a 7. You know, the execution of my dive could be exactly the same as Freddie's, but just because I'm not what they're used to seeing, they might just go slightly lower. I don't know. It never felt like something I should even think about or even consider. But there became a time where I realized it was a strength and it was a power. And it was around the time that I decided to represent Jamaica as well. I realized it was a real strength to me to be that standout, be that, you know, difference in a room of just the same. And I really tried to embrace that. And the way that I carried myself internationally was really embracing it. I love wearing this tracksuit. I love wearing these bright colors. Because if I'm already going to stand out, I might as well stand out more, but stand out for really good reasons, hopefully. And yeah, that's what I really tried to do. And I think it helped me understand who I was a little bit more. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, it's kind of, like I said, there's this portion of this journey, especially with Jamaica, that was getting in touch with myself. But then the other part that was more out, like, what can I do for others? What is this doing for the world? You know, and there were times where I'd had, you know, people who were, like I said, big and tall divers that like looked like us, that would reach out and, you know, cheer me on. And just knowing that had an impact on them in the same way that Yona's diving had an impact on me before I even met him, shows that there's something bigger to all of this. And, you know, on the point of you're saying, like, about the judging, like, I mean, it's possible, of course, that someone is literally seeing you differently, but there's even minute details that we have no control of that are. And one example of that was I was told at some point that, you know, a possibility with my diving was that because the soles of our feet are white, it makes our toe point look worse, right? And so that's
Yeah,
like
it's
a
crazy.
physical thing. That's not even, you can't even attribute that to racism. That's just plain physical bias. That, oh, well, because their feet are more apparent and because we're big dudes, it would literally appear as though their feet are less pointed, and that could lead to a point deduction on a dive, right? So even things that aren't literally part of some sort of systemic issue can even still have effects in a sport that's especially subjective.
Yeah, I mean I suppose you touched on it a little bit, but it's only, I guess you can only control the things that you can control. But it kind of seems like, both of you took that mindset. But I also just remember, again, like from Yona's point of view, this is not speaking about the judges, but like talking about people in the UK, my friends, for example. Like, I wasn't their favorite diver. Yona was. he, he was the one that they all wanted to watch, like not me. And so I think it's so powerful that obviously Yona recognized that as a strength, because it was. And I think a lot of people saw it in that way. But again, just on identity a little bit more, right, Yohan? Because again, to me, again, doing the research from this, I'm looking at a few things. Like, obviously, we've talked about diving a lot, and then there's bobsleigh, which we're obviously gonna get into. But of course, there's Canada, there's Jamaica, there's the UK, there's Germany, there's Africa, there's athlete, there's neuroscience, like med school, or want to be, there's photography. Like, that's a lot of stuff. And then again, the way you were talking earlier, that actually sounds to me like maybe you see that as a strength. Like, your identity is like whatever it needs to be in the moment to fulfill, your kind of purpose. And there's so many things here. So is that kind of true? And I just find it so interesting that there's all these different threads like woven together.
No, I really appreciate that. It's hard to say what exactly has kind of led me to have an interesting, diverse mix of identities, like you said. I never really pinpoint it to one thing, but obviously none of that would happen without being in having these opportunities arise and really taking the open doors. Like, I had so many times where I was close to making a major life-changing decision, like where to go to university, or whether or not to continue diving or to try a new sport, and I just always took it because I thought, you can try, and life is long as far as how many things you can fit into life. I think and it's funny because I told Yona this too, is that I'm someone who likes the comfort and consistency concept of life, and that's the absolute opposite of what I've really had on this journey, because I'm traveling and I'm going here and I'm going there, and everyone that I speak to is like, that's so amazing. And sometimes like I get tired of it, not tired in the sense that I'm not enjoying it, but that like it's exciting, and it's almost overwhelming sometimes to have such a kind of a life where you can't see past the next 3 months, because who knows what I'll do next? I really don't. People ask me that all the time, like, well, what are you gonna do next year? I don't know. But that's maybe part of the exciting point. And I actually had a friend tell me this the other day, and it stuck with me, but it was, if you ask your younger self and you ask your older self, what do you think of what I'm doing right now? And they both would be proud of you or excited for you, then you're on a path that works. And realistically, when I think about all these kind of major phases of my life that I've gone through as a photographer and as a student and as an athlete, those are all things that I'd say the younger and older version of myself would approve of. So it's just, I'm going to keep going with that and experiencing things as they come, because it's exciting to do it.
That's a really nice way to put it, actually. I never thought about both at the same time. Mm-hmm. Like younger and older self. I'd always thought like, would like the young version of you, align with that dream, or like, would you on your deathbed, think that was something with time well spent? But both at the same time it's actually even more focusing. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, living in that state of flux is hard work. It is exhausting because we do like comfort, but you do find comfort within that chaos, and you do find consistency within the fluctuation of life, which is totally normal. But the better obviously you can manage all that, the more successful I think you can become, because it encourages creativity and it encourages thinking outside the box, and it just pushes you beyond limits that you might otherwise set, which means that if you live by those limits, you don't grow as far as you could potentially grow. And
Yeah.
I think that's not exactly what you've done. Is you've moved into a completely different sport. You've challenged those limits. You're stepping outside the comfort zone, and you're just seeing what you can do. And I'm looking forward to getting to this phase now with this bobsled kind of thing, because I mean, first of all, if continuing the theme of identity that we've been speaking about, it's a whole different sport. There's very minimal correlation between the two things. And we had Anando's the other day, and we spoke at length about this, which was really nice. But I think the first thing that I'd actually love to know is how much you've had to break down the identity that you built as a diver over so many years to now become Yohan the brakeman.
Yeah, there's the first thing that I really encountered, of course, was being a rookie. Like I I had to go from
Humbling.
being, yeah, well, I even told myself before I even started bobsled, I said, okay, well, I'm going to try this. And I think it's going to be hard because it's brand new. And I'm so used to being an expert in the field that I'm in for all these years. And so you kind of turn it around, and you got to be like, wow, I'm starting fresh. Like, I don't know anything, and it's funny because, with diving helped me to improve fast in bobsled. And looking back on the videos now of my first day pushing, which was only just a year and a half ago, it looks like I'm a different person now compared to then, as far as, the technique and everything. So it's been a wild ride of just learning so much, and you have to kind of expose yourself to that. But again, that's the reason I think there was a fair amount of success in that, was because of the technicality of diving, which is always learning and progressing and implementing new things, with the coaching, you're getting corrected every single dive, and, you're always thinking about the tweaks, and then sometimes you got to take a big step up and learn a new dive. It was really no different with bobsled, but I had to do that from the very bottom.
So I think this whole concept of beginning again is that you touched on, being a beginner is huge. I think that's so important. That's it. Like all of us here have been excellent in something, but then you can't, very few people, unless maybe you are a pianist or golf, maybe, I'm not sure, something like that people seem to have very long careers in. You can't do that necessarily in a sport like diving. So beginning again is hard, but then at the same time, like Yona said earlier, actually doing new things improves creativity. It gives you new things to try, new things to learn. And I think it really enriches life, but it's super hard being a beginner. And so what was your mindset for that? How did you prepare mentally going into that new sport that was so different, to try and just set you up in the right way, knowing that there's going to be a world of shit and new challenges coming your way? How do you actually prepare for that?
Yeah, I think the first big thing that I had to embrace was that it was going to suck sometimes. I knew it was just going to suck, because, with expertise comes kind of an expectation of what might happen. You have this reassurance of what might happen. And with bobsled, I had none of that, right? I didn't even go down a track, a full bobsled track, until my third month of pushing. So I'd done 3 months of dedicated training before I even did the real sport. So I had to kind of approach it with, I don't want to say it was fully intentional, but I didn't set my expectations strong until I was sure I enjoyed it, right? Because that way had something gone wrong and it just wasn't for me. You know, it's a really rough sport, and a lot of people can't handle it. You know, they go down the track and they get sick or whatever. You know, it's kind of like doing that trick where you stare down at a baseball bat and do circles. Like some people just get dizzy. They can't handle that. The G-force, the speed.
I'm out. Yeah, I'm out. Somehow diving's okay, but yeah, I'm out.
Yeah. Well, and that's fair. And you wouldn't be odd for doing that. Like it's fair. Like, you know, we have people come out and say it's not for them. That's fair. And I don't think there's any, you know, discontent towards people who can't do it. But that was my expectation for myself, was I might come out like that, and that's okay. But I did tell myself before I started bobsled that given the level I'd taken diving to, I wouldn't want to stay in the sport unless I have the chance at superseding that or overcoming that and getting better than I had in diving.